welcome back to my channel for another video. Today we are doing the next installment of the I Try Your Wishlist Supply series. This series is one that I started at the beginning of the year over here on YouTube, where every month I take your suggestions for supplies, my patrons vote on them, and then I review the one that wins here on the channel. So if you'd like to check out the previous installments of this series, I'll leave the playlist linked in the description box below so that you can check out what other supplies I've already reviewed. I'd like to preface this by saying I am not an artiste with a capital A. I am a creative journaler, so I review these supplies from the standpoint that I would personally use them, as well as the understanding that I have of the supply itself. If you have a different opinion or like to use them in a different way and they work for you, I'm not trying to throw shade on your favorite supply. I just try my best to provide my personal opinion and share the knowledge that I do have with you so that you can make an informed decision based on your own research. So with all of that being said, let's get into it. Watercolor brush pens. Here's the down and dirty scoop. They are not like watercolor. I know. Isn't that crazy? I wanted to talk a little bit with you about the different ones that I have experience with. I have 6 different brands here to share with you and talk to you about whether or not I think they are a supply that you absolutely need in your arsenal. From my experience, there are 2 kinds of brush pens. The most popular kind of brush pen is the real brush pen. These are brush pens that have real bristles like a regular paintbrush would. So I don't know if you can see that there. They're all little individual hairs. And they contain an ink that is water soluble. So when you brush over it with something like a water brush, it's supposed to kind of dissolve, right? Hence the watercolor term. To my understanding, kind of the OG real brush pens were the Zig Clean Color real brush pens. I have had these for at least 6 years now. And they're the same thing. They have those real bristles and that watercolor ink inside of them. Now, there are other types of watercolor brush pens. For example, you have something like the Eco line. These are supposed to be like an ultra concentrated water reactive ink, again, but they have a somewhat flexible brush tip, kind of like a Tombow pen. They don't have the bristles. It's one solid piece, and it is a little flexible. So that's that style. Another like that style is the Marabou Aqua Pen Graphics. Again, it has that all just felt tip marker style, but it doesn't have really any give to the marker itself. This one also happens to have a small bullet tip on the end. So that's kind of what a watercolor marker brush pen, I mean, they have several different names, but essentially it is a tip either with singular bristles like a regular brush, or it is a highly pigmented marker that when you put water on top of that ink or scribble that ink onto something and water it down, you can then use like watercolor. Now, there is a catch, if you will, to using water brush pens. And the truth of the matter is, they really only work super well on watercolor paper or something like a Tomori River paper where the ink is going to sit on top of the paper. If you're using something like cardstock, printer paper, this is a moleskin paper, papers that are meant to absorb your color rather than for the color to sit on top of, your color doesn't really work like watercolor. For instance, here's our little test patch here. These watercolors are the same watercolors that I tested up here. I used the same exact technique, the same amount of time and weight between, putting it down and putting the water over it. And while the color does reactivate and spread out a little bit, it's not going to look like watercolor like these ones do on this particular watercolor paper. Of course, I have not tested these on all papers, but this seems to be the general kind of rule. Works really great on watercolor paper or other papers where the ink sits on the top, but if you have a paper that is absorbent, it does not look like watercolor. Now, of course, you always have the option of taking your brush pen, right, scribbling it into a palette or on a piece of plastic, then taking your water brush and picking that color up like watercolor. You can always use them that way, of course, and then it would work like watercolor. Here's the secret. Most markers that are water reactive will also do that. Sometimes the watercolor brush pens ink is more pigmented, so it will give you a better effect. However, the same basic principle can be performed with something like a Tombow. I can color my Tombow marker on the page, wet it, and it will probably look like this. I can also color my Tombow marker onto a sheet of paper, Crayola marker, any marker that's water reactive, and you're going to get that same effect. Again, the advantage to using the watercolor specific marker versus a regular old water reactive marker is sometimes the ink is more pigmented and you get a better, more vibrant wash out of it. But I just wanted to be upfront and let you guys know about that because I feel like that isn't really explained to us on the packaging or anything like that. Like, whenever you look at watercolor brush pens, you never see something that says will probably only work well on watercolor paper, right? There may be somebody out there who put it there, but I have not personally seen it. So if you're hoping to get something like this marker and use it like watercolor on your regular journal page paper that's not meant for mixed media, watercolor, etc., then you're probably going to be pretty disappointed. However, if you use them on watercolor paper, they're so much fun. So I went ahead and tested each of the 6 brands that I have. The 6 brands that I have are Ohuhu, Color It, Zig Clean Color by Kiritaki, the Arteza Real Brush Pens, the Ecoline Brush Pens, and the Marabou Aqua Pen Graphics. That is a mouthful. I tried to use similar colors for all 3 swatches. I chose a yellow, a pink, and kind of a greeny teal color. As you can see here, some of them I didn't get exact matches on, but I did my best. For the most part, most of them do what they say they're going to do. You color them down and you use water on top, and voila, it acts like watercolor, right? They wet down really nicely. Sometimes you can get a little bit of gradation going on. Here you can see the difference when you kind of outline a shape and then water it down to fill it in. Just to note here, I did mix up the Color It and Ohuhu lines. So the Color It is on top and the Ohuhu is here. Ohuhu, it's such a fun thing to say. I did a little circle down here where I tried to put the yellow down, water it down, and then add a little pink on top of it while it's still wet, because usually when you're working with watercolor, at least in a palette, you are working with multiple colors over top of each other. So I wanted to see how that would look. I think the Ohuhu and the Marabou did really well. Zig was hard to tell because the color was so different. But for the most part, you know, you can kind of blend them a little bit. Found that when doing the line drawings, most of them kind of stayed looking like they were what they were supposed to look like. However, I did find that the Arteza, one, they seem to water down a lot more muted than the color goes down itself. And the outline of my painting really did kind of wash away. On these kind of swatches here, we're going to use them to draw something and then put water over them. The Arteza was actually my least favorite. There are millions of brands out there. Most of them are pretty much the same, especially when you get into things like Ohuhu and Color It and all of those. There are a million more affordable brands on Amazon. Same with Arteza and stuff. I can't really speak for all of them. I've only used these 6. To be honest, my favorite, least expensive brand out of the 3 that I have here is the Ohuhu. I just got them, so I don't know how well they'll fare, but if I was to recommend a more affordable brand to you, that would be the one I would choose. I will leave all of the pens and brush markers and things that I'm talking about linked below in case you would like to check them out. So, water brush pens as a whole. What are the pros, right? So they're very travel friendly. You can throw a bunch of markers into your bag, and if you wanted to just color something in, you can do that. If you wanted to kind of add a watercolor effect and then put your details back in over it, this could also be a fun option because you're just, you have the same color ink in the brush pen and it's all ready to go. You don't have to carry a cup of water or anything around because you're just going to use a water brush pen. You can also get a large amount of color range for your money. So, for instance, the Ohuhu Aqua Natural Brush, these are 36 for $23. It comes out to 64 cents. These prices were based on when I looked it up today. They can change, but I would assume that hopefully the prices between things wouldn't change so drastically that this price comparison would be irrelevant. So, amazing color ranges. Travel friendly, low mess because you're just using the water brush, and they're really fun to use for lettering. I wrote this like watercolor brush. I was supposed to say pen, but it says Ben's. We're just going to ignore that. I needed coffee that day, clearly. But they can be really fun to do some type of brush lettering with, especially if you're someone who wants to practice maybe drawing with say an inked up brush. This could kind of be used in place of that without having to continually reload your brush. Also, again, like I said, you have a marker that matches the color of your watercolor if you chose to do that. For instance, I could come in here on this leaf after I already watercolored it and just kind of redefine those shapes. Like so. And it all matches and looks good. So those are some advantages. Cons we already talked about at length. It only works well on watercolor paper. That could be a pro if you only use watercolor paper. That's a little subjective, so I'll give you that. More affordable sets sometimes don't offer replacements. So I know you can get the Arteza sets. You can buy individual watercolor brushes as replacements. I know with the Zig Clean Color, the Marabou, and the Ecoline brush pens, you can all buy singles online. However, things like the Ohuhu, you cannot. They only come in one set. They don't really offer replacements from my understanding. Maybe they will in the future. These color ones, however, though, are pretty unique. These were the only watercolor brush pens that I came upon like them, and they are refillable. So you can actually buy a bottle of this refillable ink. You open up the back of the pen here. This isn't an extra tip. You actually open it up and there's a marker in there and you add extra ink so you can refill your watercolor brush pen. I think that is brilliant, and they get gold stars all around for that. Some of them can be dry and scratchy. I've noticed this especially with certain colors. Some are more vibrant and flowing than others. A lot of times, especially if you're moving quickly, you'll get little to no color or it's all scratchy. To be expected to get texture and things, of course, with the real brush pens, but just something to note. And they don't really layer like watercolors. If you were to let things dry, put another color on top, re-wet it, mix it together, you could probably get away with that pretty easily. But for doing like wet on wet techniques, like you're not going to watercolor this brush pen down and then be able to drip in other watercolors to make them mix, which to me is really the fun of watercolors, getting all those fun gradient and vibrant mixes going on. So overall, here's my 2 cents. Take with it what you will. I think watercolor brush pens are very fun. I think they can be super fun to experiment and work with, but I would not replace my watercolors with them. I think if you're looking to doodle with them or use them here and there, if you're someone who likes to urban sketch and you just want to get like a quick something down that you can water down with water, if you consistently use journals that have watercolor friendly paper, then these might be a game changer for you. This might be your new favorite supply, right? I know from what I said in the beginning of the video, it could really sound like I was saying these aren't good. I'm not trying to knock them. I'm just trying to give you all the information that you may need when trying to make a decision. I hate it when people get supplies and they think that they're doing something wrong because it doesn't work the way that you saw somebody else use it, especially during a review, like, oh my god, these are amazing, blah blah blah, and they show you like how it's done, but they don't tell you it only works that way on a certain paper. So then you go to try it, right, and it doesn't look anything like that, and you think, well, I obviously don't know what I'm doing, I can't figure it out, I must have got a bad supply, whatever, and you blame yourself. I don't want you to blame yourself. It's just the nature of the watercolor brush pen, okay? So if you needed to hear that, there's your little pep talk. All right, let's wrap this all up and give you my final thoughts, shall we? In my opinion, as I kind of said, I think most of the real brush water pens are relatively the same, minus, you know, if you need light fastness or things like that, you probably want a more expensive one. But in terms of, you know, the way that they work, they're pretty much the same. Some have more pigmented colors than others. Some of them have cool things like these refillable ones. Some have lots of colors, some have little colors. Pretty much all of them, in my experience, you lose bristled hairs here and there. So it's really all about, you know, the ones that you can fit into your budget and the ones that you like the color selection of. I highly encourage you to research the different colors and things. And look at what's in the set before you purchase them to make sure you're going to like the colors that you get in the set. In my opinion, my favorite are the ones that I think are the most vibrant, and so far out of the brands that I have tried, my favorite are the Ohuhu Aqua Natural brushes and the Ecoline brush pens, with the Colorit being a close second. That's kind of all I have to share with you about watercolor brush pens. I don't really have anything to show you how I've particularly used them because right now I'm using this moleskin where the paper isn't the best. I did go ahead and use them on this page. So on here, I colored a couple of them onto a plastic sheet, added some water, and smushed them down onto the paper. You've seen me do that in lots of other videos with other markers. I call it the smoosh technique. If you're interested in them, I'd say give them a go. Get yourself some watercolor friendly paper and some a cheap set of them and see what you like. See if you enjoy using them. See if the papers you usually use work with them. But just go into it with a mindset that they aren't like watercolor. It's not magic. And know that if you do have other brush pens that are water reactive, like Tombow markers or something even like Crayola, you can kind of play around with the same techniques that other people are playing around with without investing in the bigger products. If that's something that's not in your budget, you can still have fun and use the things that you have in the same way. All right, I think we've come to the end of my review. I hope that you guys found this helpful and gave you some food for thought. Let me know your opinion on watercolor brush markers below. Have you tried them? Do you love them? Did I just kind of knock your favorite supply? Let me know in the comments below. Again, take what I say with a grain of salt. Do your own research, but I hope that my food for thought gave you some things to think about if you were in the market for watercolor brush pens. And yeah, with all of that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you to my patrons for sponsoring today's video. Without them, I wouldn't be here on YouTube making videos. because I wouldn't be able to pay my bills or feed my dog Shadow or buy these art supplies. So thank you so much to them for helping me support the channel. I greatly appreciate them. And thank you for watching, because if you weren't watching, then what's the point? I hope you all have a fantastic rest of your week, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care, guys. Bye!